And good morning, my friends. Welcome back to ColeJakeTV. I'm your messenger, GB. And here this week, we're getting into the Gospel of Luke. And the question comes about when you begin to study the breadth of this particular chapter. The main topics, and I think what Jesus is getting to us here and getting across is the power of prayer, the impact and necessity of humility within the ranks of his discipleship. So as disciple makers here at ColeJakeTV, and what Jesus was intending to do within the ranks of his disciples was to inaugurate and birth a desire for discipleship. And at the crux and heart of that mission, building up disciples within the ranks of believers, the crux was to influence them to pray. And humility, the spirit of humility, was a necessity. And so what we're going to get into throughout this chapter, there's the witness of the humble sinner, and we'll get into a parable in a moment related to the persistence of prayer. And we'll also get in a little bit later in the chapter the witness of a blind Bartimaeus. But the purpose of this particular parable that Jesus spoke in the earliest part of chapter 18, that I think all of us can take away from this week, is to not lose heart. And to not lose heart in prayer and the power of prayer. This is what Jesus begins by saying in the very first verse. And then he spoke a parable to them, that men always ought to pray and not lose heart. That men always ought to pray. I believe that is such a powerful line and such a powerful few words that Jesus says. Because man inherently, and women, humanity, is created with an instinct, with a spiritual instinct. So prayer comes naturally. I believe if every one of us were to take a look at our hearts, we would realize prayer is a natural instinct within the spiritual realm in which we exist. Here's what the Ecclesiastes says in chapter 3, verse 11. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity in their hearts, except that no one can find out the work that God does from beginning to end. Wow. We can see here that obstacles in life so often come in the way and get in the way of effective, fervent, and constant prayer. The obstacles of life, one obstacle or another. I think Jesus knew, and he taught and encouraged his disciples to always pray. As the psalmist says, pray without ceasing. Pray morning, noon, and night. Let prayer always be on your lips and flowing from a thankful and gracious heart. I don't think Jesus did not mean that we should always be on our knees, always have our knees bent, always have our eyes closed in prayer. I don't think that's what he's really getting to. It wasn't in terms of the posture or the position, but we must always be what is often pointed to throughout the Bible, which is in a spirit of prayer. A place in our spirit where we're always asking God for direction. We are always asking God for his guidance. We are always asking God to lead us and guide us and show us the right way to go. I think that's the spirit of prayer Jesus is really indicating here. You know, Paul, the Apostle Paul, mentioned this idea in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. Verse 17, when he wrote, "Pray without ceasing." Pray without ceasing. It's hard to measure how much good constant prayer can, would, and does do. And I think, more importantly, how much bad we would keep from ourselves if we would go to prayer first, asking the Lord for guidance, seeking his will, rather than get out in front of God, jump without asking, move without praying, doing without first seeking God's blessing. Do you notice in the Old Testament, throughout all of the Bible, how often God's people and prophets and disciples pray? Do you notice the one question his disciples ask Jesus? Teach us, Lord, how to pray. It wasn't, Lord, show us how to do more miracles. It wasn't, Lord, show us how to make more money. It wasn't, Lord, show us how to really build up this ministry and grow the followers of you. It was, Lord, teach us how to pray. Teach us how to pray. What does Jesus say here? And not lose heart. Often, so often, my friends, we fail in praying because we lose heart. That really means we get discouraged. And when we get discouraged, we cease from praying. He says, don't lose heart. Or don't lose the belief that you have, that you should have. Or don't lose the focus on Jesus that you should have. Or don't lose the main thrust of what you're doing for the glory of God as we should have. I think it is very easy to lose heart, especially in prayer. You know, in Colossians chapter 4, verse 12, Paul praised a man because he was always laboring fervently in prayers. Paul, the apostle, he's praising a man, Epaphras, because he was always laboring fervently in prayer. I think because Paul knew prayer was hard work, that required a fervent labor, a steadfast faith. You know, a theologian tried to explain at one time why prayer was difficult. And this is what he said. He identified 3 parts of the human being that are engaged in prayer. 1, there is the understanding by which we work intelligently. 2, there is the heart by which we labor willingly and believe. And number 3, there is the will by which we labor diligently until our prayers get answered. It is easy, my friends, to lose heart in prayers because the devil hates prayer. And the devil wants to distract you. Never forget this. If prayers were powerless, if they didn't carry any power in them, they would be easy. Prayers move mountains. Jesus promises this. That's where prayers come into play. Prayers are powerful. It is easy to lose heart in prayer. Every one of us have experienced that at some point or another. Because I think we are not always convinced of the reality of the actual power of prayer. Remember that Jesus lived a prayerful life. And he lives in people, inspiring them to pray. And not only pray, but to pray for his people. Here's what Hebrews says. I'll leave you with chapter 7, verse 25. Therefore, he is also able to save to the uttermost those who come to God through him, since he always lives to make intercession for them. Think about that today as you go forth and prosper in whatever you do, with prayer always on your lips. Thanks for joining us. I'm your messenger, GB, here at CJTV. Come back and join us tomorrow. Till then, have a prayerful and blessed day.